I moved quite soon after that to another paper in this further south in a town called Darlington. And my wife took a job at the local hospital on the intensive care ward. And this old man came in with this horrible, ugly, great wart on the end of his nose, and he wanted it removed. And the anaesthetist took one look at him and said, "Better not put deep drugs into you, mate. I might kill you." So he opted to use ether. Now, he pretty quickly discovered why ether isn't used very often in surgery anymore. It's highly explosive. Unfortunately, the surgeon on that day also chose to use a hot wire to remove the horrible carbuncle from the end of his nose. So as the hot wire came close to the pimple, boom, the guy's body exploded. And my wife came home that night absolutely distraught. I mean, from the point of view of the hospital, this was a tragedy. It was a disaster. But from my point of view, and my paper's point of view, it was an absolutely incredible story. And what's more, it's my job to put it there. I mean, if I put it there, I'll be a hero. And if they find out that I knew about it and I didn't put it there, I'd be in trouble. Which is exactly what my wife was afraid of, because she felt that if I did write that story, she'd immediately be identified as the source, and so would her friend, the anaesthetist, and they'd both lose their jobs. It was a pretty good bet, actually. So I went to work the next day and kept quiet about it. 2 days passed, 3, a week, 2 weeks. Come the inquest. And who should be covering it but my biggest enemy? A great big fat guy called Martin. And afterwards, he came bowling up to me. "Eastham! You bastard! You knew about this, didn't you? You didn't tell us." Well, no, I didn't. But my wife kept to keep a job, and I knew the story was going to come out anyway. Now, the thing about the issue of the truth is that the best stories are the ones you don't make up. You can't make them up. They're brilliant. But there are many journalists, I'm afraid, who try every day. There was a friend of mine called Jackie Davis. She was covering Brussels for her paper. One night she got a call from her news editor. "Jackie, what's this story about the mile-high tower?" And she said, I don't know anything about a mile-high tower. He said, "Yeah, it's in the Daily Telegraph." And there it was. There's this huge story in there, and it was about how the EU was so arrogant they were going to spend a preposterous amount of money building this pre-epic monument in the middle of Brussels to celebrate their own greatness. And this journalist had walked into a Eurocrat's room and seen the plans all over the table and run out and written it. It was written by the young Daily Telegraph Brussels correspondent, a man called Boris Johnson. Anyway, Jackie ran around at night trying to find anything on this story, trying to make it stand up. Not a scrap, nothing, zilch. So next morning she ran Boris down and said, "Boris, that was bollocks, wasn't it?" He said, "Well, yes, it was really. Good idea though, eh?" So there you are. You've got an example of a journalist who's quite prepared for careerist reasons to stretch the truth, retail myths, even make it up completely. Keeps his editor very happy. It's done very well for Boris, who is essentially a comedian. But it's not my style. My style is to listen very carefully, to take a good note, to put 2 and 2 together. I mean, essentially what I do is I look for the illogical part of what I'm being told, and I press hard, sometimes bloody hard, until the truth comes out. The good journalists are the ones who make as much trouble as possible. Not just for the sake of it, but to hold up a mirror to the powerful people and say, "This is what you look like, this is what you've done." Now, many years later, a very good colleague of mine called Nick Robinson, who is the political editor at the BBC, wrote a book. And in it he said that I'd asked the question that was spelt the beginning of the end for a Prime Minister. So I did cause a bit of trouble. But we'll come to that.